You cannot miss out on this. As America readies itself for a political and cultural shift with the next presidency, I can't help but think back to what Jordan Peterson said on Bill Maher last year. That's sounding more true than ever, but that's barely scratching the surface because there's a question here that you need to ask about the far left and its consequences. So take a look for yourself before we dive in.
This is the main issue. I mean, part of the reason that you see all this foolishness on university campuses too is because people have bought this idiot meta-Marxism, which is that the way to look at every social relationship that people ever have is through the lens of power. And that is, we can put that squarely at the feet of the universities, as far as I'm concerned, is, marriage is a patriarchal institution, and business is nothing but oppression, and you have to view every single situation that emerged historically as oppressor versus oppressed. And then once you get that, which you can get in about 2 minutes if you sit in a course that teaches that sort of thing, you have a lens to moralize about the whole world through. Well, and that's at the hands of the radical left, too, Bill. And one of the things the Democrats also have to pay the price for, I would say, is their absolute refusal to draw a line between the moderate Democrats and the extremists. They're completely incapable of doing that. Like, I've talked to 40 senators and congressmen in the last 5 years. I asked them all the same question, including RFK. He wouldn't answer either. When does the left go too far? Well, we certainly bloody well saw it in the last month, didn't we? Because they got the oppressive narrative a little mucked up, we might say. And the consequences of that are going to unfold pretty brutally over the next few months.
We've been saying this all along, and so is Jordan Peterson when he shot to the public spotlight nearly a decade ago. It's that the kind of left-wing media we're seeing in universities and curriculum is creating a new crop of future employees, citizens and activists that will spread this flavor of leftism far and wide, and guess what? That's exactly what we should have always expected when research like this comes out, saying that 30% of Gen Z students outright support Marxism, while nearly half view socialism in a favorable light. By the way, this is a great time to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more hard-hitting truths, and not everyone is willing to speak. Now, I think that's why these educational institutes have become the breeding ground over the past decades for exactly the oppressor versus oppressed narrative we see reverberating across culture. And you know how wrong that culture has gone with a pretty sizable segment of the progressive left base? Has no problem showing sympathy for Brian Thompson's assassin, Luigi Mangione, seeing the rich CEO as the oppressor that supposedly justified a violent rebellion against him and that oppressive system. What's even more intriguing is to see how the question, when does the left go too far, finds no worthy answer. There's people on the left that will tell you that it goes too far when it engages in violence. I remember when RFK once said that in a sarcastic manner, that the left goes too far when it embraces Dick Cheney. But these still aren't good enough answers because as a young generation comes up believing Marxism needs another try, or that equity is a laudable goal, or that having a stricter border is somehow racist or xenophobic, that's a question that desperately needs to be asked.
What actually worked is we had an agreement with Mexico that was called the Remain in Mexico Agreement, which says that if someone crossed into Mexico illegally from typically Central or South America, they would remain in Mexico while their asylum case was proceeding in the U.S., and the numbers plummeted. We had the lowest rate, as I said, in 45 years, and then Biden came in and ripped that international agreement to shreds, and that's what produced now 8.4 million illegal aliens since Biden's been president.
Boy, I walked right into that one, didn't I?
Yes.
I know you know this. This is part of your... But, all right, let me ask it a different way. Do you think if we attacked it from the reverse angle, in other words, if we punish the employers...
Absolutely.
It would, and you think we should?
Oh, look, I am all for E-Verify. I would absolutely punish the employers, and I've introduced legislation to do that multiple times.
And what happened? Your party must not like that because we know cheap labor is good.
So, look, there are a lot of Republicans who don't like that. They're fewer, but I do think that the Republican Party is changing. I think we're becoming much more of a blue-collar party, which I think is a very good thing.
Okay. This is for... They are switching, aren't they? Yes, it's interesting. The parties are kind of switching, like who the elitists are. It used to be the country club Republicans, and now it's the Chardonnay sipping Democrat.
Yeah.
I know you've written about it. It's an interesting do-si-do the parties do.
It's almost happened completely in Canada now. The Conservatives are basically the working class party in Canada.
Right.
Can you believe that? A conservative Republican politician like Ted Cruz calling for punishing employers for hiring cheap illegal immigrant labor? Combine this with the fact that the Republicans have become the ones calling for a more protectionist policy, tariffs, and lower taxes to safeguard the American worker, It's no wonder that this new kind of economic populism among the conservatives is so attractive to the working class. Just as the left in this country have slipped off way too far in that direction, the conservative parties in places like the US and Canada have seen a resurgence with the middle class vote, as we saw in this election. We saw something similar when a large segment of the Republican base this past week was calling for an end to H-1B visas that brings the top talent from abroad to fill high-tech positions in the US. Regardless of where you stand on that debate, it's interesting that a considerable portion of the conservatives call for an end to this program and hire American workers instead, even if they're relatively less qualified. That's at least a shift in mindset that's trickled down to the lower levels, which is why the Republicans of today are placed so different to decades ago on the Overton window. The only difference is, while history has been a haunting lesson for how dangerous the far right is, our educational system has done a terrible job at telling this new crop of generations of what far leftism has done across the last century.
I think we've done a pretty decent job of determining when right-wing beliefs become dangerous. I think that they become dangerous when the people who stand on the right evoke notions of racial superiority or ethnic superiority, something like that. It's fairly easy to draw a box around them and place them to one side and necessary, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that. What I fail to see happening on the left, and this is with regards to the sensible left, because such a thing exists, is for the same thing to happen with regards to the radical leftists. Okay, so here's an open question. If it's not diversity, inclusivity, and equity as a triumvirate that mark out the too excessive left, and with equity defined, by the way, not as equality of opportunity, which is an absolutely laudable goal, but as equality of outcome, which is how it's defined, then exactly how do we demarcate the too extreme left? What do? We say, well, there's no such thing as the too extreme left?
See what I mean? This was from nearly 7 years ago, and it's manifesting today in real time. Everything you see on issues like immigration, economics, foreign policies downstream from our failure to answer this question. Even in business, that's what you get: disasters like Bud Light, Gillette, and Jaguar that try to swim with the stream of the woke tide in culture and reap some financial benefit. And what's worse is that it risks creating a reactionary movement on the right that's just as dangerous. But there's something else that Jordan said here that I believe deserves a second thought, and it's about how progressive movements in culture and relationships haven't necessarily resulted in the kind of happiness and fulfillment they promised.
For Jordan, are men more susceptible to loneliness than women?
No. Well, okay. We know this. So at puberty, women become more sensitive to negative emotion than men, and then that's permanent, on average, through the entire life course. And it looks like it's associated with hormonal changes. And so cross-culturally, women experience higher levels of depression and anxiety and shame and guilt, all the negative emotions that clump together. And so loneliness is a pain-related emotion, and women are more susceptible to that.
What do you, now everybody recognizes that women, girls, mature faster than boys. I mean, this is why they're going out with the upperclassmen. And at any age, they usually don't want somebody exactly their age, even though this country is like crazy for age appropriate. God forbid we go out of that. But what do you think, if you had to name a number, pick of like how far ahead the women are years-wise?
Well, we know women prefer men 4 years older cross-culturally.
4?
Yeah. But and it's not necessarily only a matter of maturation. It's also the case that women are more attracted by socioeconomic status and productivity than men are in relationship to
how
women.
many years head start does a man need to match his maturity level to a woman's level? I think 40.
Well, there's wide individual differences in that too.
I remember reading an interesting study that came out a few years ago that spoke about the paradox of declining female happiness, and I think the central thesis here was twofold. It's that progressive feminism has been somewhat disconnected from the biological and evolutionary imperatives of women in general, and secondly, it has fallen short of the utopian dream it sold as a movement. And as they say, happiness is just reality minus expectation. It starts to make sense why humans are a lot more complicated and difficult to pacify than any narrow ideological reading of them can do justice. But let me know in the comments if you agree, and share this video across your social media to get the word out. I think we stand at a crossroad with this new administration that could decide where the tide of our politics and cultures eventually turn.